Hi, today is my attempt to make an FRQ workshop for you today for our 2021 exam. I'm going to walk you through not only what an FRQ is, but what our exam will look like in May. So first, let's talk about the exam overview. Basically, the AP exam will assess students on all the skills and objectives that are outlined in the course framework. If you are interested in looking at the course framework, you just need to let me know, and I am happy to give you the course framework so you can kind of see all the skills that we're working on in class kind of match right with the course framework. So the AP exam in May is going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes long. And the first 60 minutes will include 60 multiple choice questions. So you will do 60 multiple choice questions in 60 minutes. It's going to be really important that you're practicing taking multiple choice exams, which is very difficult to take in our current situation of this kind of hybrid learning. Some of you are purely online, some of you are coming twice a week. It's really hard for me to give you multiple choice questions in this scenario. So that's why when we use Albert.io, it's going to be really important for you to do those to practice the multiple choice questions because it is worth 50% of your total score on your AP exam. And you're going to need the tricky part about the multiple choice questions is you need to do approximately one question per minute. So that is going to be tricky because you need to be going through these fairly quickly. The second part of the exam and what we're going to focus on the most today is the free response questions. So you'll have an hour and 15 minutes to write 3 free response questions. The free response questions are worth 7 points, and those are also 50% of your score. You have approximately 25 minutes to do each free response questions. Okay. So that's just kind of the overview of the exam. As we work through the course, we'll continue to talk about this. Last year we worked towards this goal all year, the 2 hours and 15 minutes exam with the 60-minute multiple choice. And then in March, College Board changed the exam. So last year they only did 2 FRQs. I'm not sure what's going to happen this year. As of right now, we are planning for the 2 hour and 15-minute test because that's all that we know. And if College Board changes their mind and decides to go with just FRQs similar to last year, I will let you know as soon as I know. But the FRQ, in my mind, is the most important part of the exam because if they're going to switch to something, it's not going to be the multiple choice exam. It will be FRQs. So at this point, though, we're going to move forward with the exam is just normal, and we're going to take it in 2 hours and 15 minutes with 60 multiple choice questions and 3 FRQ questions. So this is the breakdown of the exam. So you can kind of see all 7 of our units and then the percentage of weight for each of those units. So right now we're working through unit 1. We're doing that fairly quickly. And you're going to see why, because about 8 to 10% of the exam is for unit 1. Every other unit is about 12 to 17% of the exam, kind of dividing down. So if we were to, and you can find it on the web, but if you broke down like ever since the exam started, what FRQs, what unit they came from, you'll see that no FRQ ever comes from unit 1, but they always come from the other 2 through 7. So the multiple choice question is going to assess a lot of different, one of these 5 skills. So the first skill is the concepts and processes skill, and that's basically, do you know the course material? Can you apply the course material? And you look at changes over time. So the course material through changes over time is kind of the idea of the processing, the concepts and processes. Spatial relationships is understanding how things are related to each other, is kind of the spatial relationships. And we've started kind of working on that in class. The data and visual and scale analysis, they all kind of go together. So data analysis is looking at data, looking at the numbers or in a chart or a graph. And the visual analysis would be looking at a photo, or it could be a primary source, something like that would be a visual analysis. Scale analysis is comparing things, the different scales. So is it a national scale? Is it state scale? Is it a regional scale? So is it a local scale? Looking at the scale of analysis. So a lot of that is going to be maps, which we're going to talk about later this week. So this is an example of the multiple choice questions you would see on the exam. And there's two types of multiple choice questions. Well, two types in the sense, one that has stimuli and one that does not. So a stimuli is a chart, a graph, a picture, and then there's going to be a series of questions that kind of go along with that. So you'll see here is a chart about coal miners, and then question 8 would go along with that. Okay. And then if we actually had the exam, we would see that question 8 and 9 actually go along with the chart. So you could have up to 5 questions that go along with a chart or a picture or a graph. And so that would be questions with a stimuli. And then we have questions without a stimuli. So those are kind of standalone questions. So you can see question 12 here on the right is a standalone question. All right, so this is the type of question that you may see on your AP exam. The one thing I'm going to tell you about the multiple choice section of this test is vocabulary is your friend here. It's very, very important that you know and can understand the vocabulary, because if you don't know the vocabulary, then you won't know the answer to the question. And that is a true key for the FRQ portion and, most importantly, the multiple choice portion of the test. That's why vocabulary is so important. So the free response question is broken up the same way into the 5 different skills that you would need to learn: the concepts and processes, the spatial relationships, the data, visual, and scale analysis. So the FRQ is going to ask you those same skills you need to know for the FRQ and for the multiple choice. Now, with the free response questions, in a typical school year, with the 2 hours and 15 minute test, you would write 3 free response questions. The first free response question that you would write would have no stimuli, meaning there's no graph, there's no chart, it's kind of just a standalone. The second FRQ you would write would have 1 stimuli. So it could be a picture, a chart, and then the question would relate back to that. The third FRQ would have 2 stimuli. So it might have a picture and a chart or a map or something like that. So that would be the 3 types of FRQs. Last year, for the AP exam, what they did was the first FRQ had 2 stimuli, and you got 25 minutes to write that. And then the second FRQ that students wrote had 1 stimuli, and they had 15 minutes to write that. So those were very quick time frames. In a normal testing situation like we're planning for this year, you will have the full 25 minutes for each FRQ. But just so you kind of know what happened last year, so that way if they change the plan and kind of go more with the system like last year, you're prepared for that. So here is an example of what an FRQ might look like. So you'll first notice the stimuli. This is a 2 stimuli question, because you'll notice there is a chart, and then there's a picture, okay? And then there's the question. So what you're going to notice about the question is numbered A through G. A through G has become the new standard for FRQs, meaning the questions will basically have 7 different parts that you'll need to write about, okay? And generally speaking, they start easier and work to a little bit harder. So this is the sample of an FRQ, what it would look like on the AP exam with the 2 stimuli. So the first thing to talk about in an FRQ is the task verbs. The task verbs are commonly used in a free response question. So here's a list of some commonly used task verbs. And depending on what the task verb is, depends on how much you would really need to write. So the first one is compare. And when you compare something, you're providing a description or an explanation of similarities and differences. To compare something, you would need to write a solid paragraph in compare. So you should plan on 4 to 5 sentences in a compare task verb. Define. Define is probably one of the easiest task verbs to get a point for. You're going to provide a specific meaning for a word or a concept. So basically, it would be just define the word, whatever they're asking you to define. This could be a one sentence answer. Describe, you're going to provide the relevant characteristics of a specific topic. Again, when you're describing something, you're going to want to make sure you're giving enough detail. I would say when you describe something, you need at least 3 to 4 sentences. Explain, provide information about how or why relationships, process, patterns, positions, or outcomes occur using evidence and reasoning. Again, I would say this is a solid 5. You need to explain it. I would also give examples in this when you're explaining something. So you're looking at a solid at least 5 sentences, if not more. And then finally, identify, indicate, or provide information about a specific topic without elaboration or explanation. This could be 1 to 2 sentences is identify. One thing I forgot to mention when we were back here looking at the FRQ example is that points totaled. On an FRQ, you always want to stay above 50% to get the most points possible. So in a traditional year, your FRQ, every single letter, so A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they're all worth 1 point. So the FRQs are always worth 7 points. And, to keep yourself in range for getting a passing score on your FRQ or getting a passing score on your overall test, I should say, is that you want to score at least a 4 or above on every FRQ. So you want to try to get as many points as you possibly can, ultimately trying to get the 7 out of 7. The stronger you can be on your FRQs, is the more likelihood you're going to get a passing score on your AP exam. So there's 7 parts. Each part is worth 1 point. Your goal should be 4 to 5 points per FRQ. And you have to be very exact in your thinking in order to get the points. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to write our first FRQ or work together to write our first FRQ. And we're going to write our first FRQ over something I think most everyone probably has tried before, okay? So we're going to write an ice cream FRQ. I'm going to ask you to think about ice cream in a way and try to write an FRQ accordingly. So our first question is define ice cream. So provide a specific meaning for the word or concept that is define. So I want you to think about which of the following answers for part A would be the correct answer. Sweet flavored frozen food containing cream and usually eggs, can come in a variety of flavors and often eaten with additional toppings or fruit. Which one of those would be the best answer to define ice cream? Now, hopefully you picked A, the sweet flavored frozen food containing cream and usually eggs. That is what ice cream is. It's asking you to define exactly what ice cream is. Describe ice cream. So provide the relevant characteristics of a specific topic. So which is correct when you describe ice cream? Ice cream can be soft served in a cone with a mix of flavors. Ice cream is often served with birthday cake, or ice cream is cold, creamy, and sweet. Hopefully you chose the last one. Ice cream is cold, creamy, and sweet. That is describing what ice cream is. So now I'm going to ask you to compare ice creams to other desserts. Remember, compare, provide a description or explanation of similarities and differences. Remember, you're aiming for 5 sentences to compare ice cream to other desserts. Next, you're going to identify. So D and E both ask you to identify. Identify and explain ice cream. Identify a second example of, Identify an example of ice cream and identify a second example of ice cream. So identify indicates or provides information about a specific topic without elaboration or explanation. The one thing I'm going to ask you to do here, though, when you identify ice cream is that you are using a complete sentence. Don't just put a one-word answer. That will not get you the point on the FRQ. Finally, you're going to explain how ice cream changes over time. So that's F. So think about how ice cream has changed over time. And I would try to write at least a paragraph explaining how ice cream has changed over time. And then G, explain criticisms of ice cream. Again, explain should be providing information about how or why a relationship, process, pattern, position, or outcome occurs using evidence or reasoning. So again, both of these should be 4 to 5 sentences to explain. So you've just completed your first FRQ with ice cream. And I think probably most of you were pretty successful. So here's everything I want you to know about writing an FRQ. Relax. Everything's going to be okay. That's the first thing. This is not, you'll get it. It's a little bit scary at first, but once you get a handle on it, this is something that will come pretty easy to you. Make sure, number one, you read the entire FRQ. Often when you grade FRQs, the first thing that becomes very clear is that students did not read the entire FRQ. Underline all task verbs. It's going to be really important that you underline the task verbs. This way you know exactly what the task is asking you to do. I would make a brief outline of what you will write. This can be done by brainstorming and bullet information. This will not be graded. Five is to complete the FRQ. And then finally, proofread and edit. Make sure you have completed all the tasks in part. Make sure you did everything that they're asking you of the FRQ. Okay, so those are the steps that you'll need to take when you're writing an FRQ. And like I said, if we have a traditional exam this year, you'll have 25 minutes per FRQ, which is going to be plenty of time for you to do everything you need to do to write a very successful FRQ. So the last kind of thing to think about is to plan. So you have 5 minutes to write what you know about a topic. So write down the vocabulary. How does it relate to the other topics? Just what clearly is the topic of this FRQ? Just start jotting down what you know because you might want to use that in your FRQ. You have about 15 minutes to answer the question, and then you have 5 minutes to proofread. So plan to take about, like I said, 5 minutes of just kind of outlining or writing down what you know about this topic, and then 15 minutes to answer the question, and then 5 minutes to proofread is your ultimate goal for these FRQs. So that is how you write an FRQ. So you've written your first one on ice cream. I'm sure you were very successful. Now you're ready to conquer some AP Human Geography FRQs.